Hello, and welcome back to Gunfighter Life, the podcast where we talk about gunfighting the right way, with God at the center, Judeo-Christian values, and worldview. Don't forget to like, subscribe, comment, and leave a review of the podcast while you're listening to this if you like it, or if you've listened before. I'll roll into a quick bio and then into the main body of the episode. If you want to skip ahead, you can skip to around 2.5-3 minutes in. As always, I'm your host, Michael Melito. First and foremost, I'm a Christian. I don't apologize for that. God is number one. I hope to recognize that in everything. This podcast is no different. Blessed be the Lord, my rock, who trains my hands for war and my fingers for battle. I grew up hunting and shooting in the southeastern United States. Joined the Marine Corps at 17, did a couple of combat tours in Iraq in the infantry. After my combat tours, I was an urban warfare instructor for the United States Marine Corps until the time I got out. I also served in a law enforcement capacity. I was a police officer, worked for LAPD, worked regular assignments, more specialized assignments, until I decided I did not any longer want to be in Los Angeles. I also served in the U.S. Army, both full-time and part-time National Guard. I've been a private contractor for a 3-letter government agency that I won't specify. I've been the commander of a tactical team and SRT team where our primary job was to stop active shooters in a large metropolitan area. I started shooting competitions even before joining the Marine Corps at 17. I've been blessed with the talents God's given me to win more shooting competitions than I can remember. State rifle and pistol champion a few times over. Again, blessed be the Lord, my rock, who trains my hands for war and my fingers for battle. FBI certified, NRA certified firearms instructor, and a bunch of other certifications. Enough about me. Let's get into the main body today, this subject, which is going to be adaptive carry, adaptive EDC concealed carry gear. And I debated whether to put this on Alpha Male Podcast or here, but I think here is probably as fitting, if not more fitting. So, if you listen to the Alpha Male Podcast, you'll listen to the episode I just did talking about, updates in my life and things like that. You know that I recently left that job being the leader of a tactical team in a large metropolitan area and got back out to what I enjoy more, which is living in the country. I run a business, which is not affiliated with this, so I won't mention it, but I run a firearms and training company. I'm very blessed to manage that company in the southeastern United States. They're not affiliated with a podcast, so I won't mention where they are, but we are a business, but we are not in a city. We're not in an incorporated city. We operate both an indoor and an outdoor range, which are far outside the city limits. So I drive quite a ways to get into the city, and even that's not a very large city. Definitely not as large as, let's say, Las Vegas, where I left. So, that being said, my EDC has changed. My concealed carry has changed, and probably will change again soon. Now, if you've been listening, you know that I'm adopting optical sights. I say that with a little bit of disdain, but I have to admit they are better. So, I'll be looking for a carry gun with an optical sight. Haven't made that switch yet, and likely when I get it, I'll practice for a while before I switch to it. But there are other changes, especially going from an urban environment like that to a rural environment. So I guess what we're going to talk about today is a little bit of philosophy. Don't think that because something is good for somebody else that it's what's best for you. A lot of people say, the Glock 19 or nothing, the Glock 19. And there's nothing wrong with the Glock 19. It's a fine, serviceable handgun. But just because it's best for somebody else doesn't mean that it's best for you. Perhaps you live in Alaska where, polar bears are a real thing. Perhaps in that situation, a Glock 19 would not be my first choice. Mine, since I'm so well versed and so trained on a 1911, probably a 10mm 1911 or a 1911 converted to 460 Roland. That's just an example of that for me. But for most people, it would probably be, a revolver and 454 Casull or something like that, 44 Magnum. But if you live in an environment, like I said when I ran a tactical team, capacity is kind of a thing. I was there to stop active shooters. Active shooters are a real threat. Terrorist activity is a real threat, and it's much more of a threat in a city than it is out in the middle of rural nowhere, kind of where I live. So your needs should be different. So one of the things that I would do with my team when I was running the team is I would take army men, like the army men that you play with when you're a child, and I would draw different environments on like a map on a table. And I would take some army men, or maybe some 45 rounds, 9mm rounds, put them on the table, and we would war game. What is the most likely scenario? If you were going to attack this place, how would you do it? Okay, well, if the terrorists are not stupid, that's probably the most likely way that they're going to do it. So now how would you counterattack them? How would you stop the active shooter if they, in fact, did that thing? So we did that quite a bit, and that's good. Don't lose your imagination when you grow up. So do the same thing with your everyday carry. What's the most likely scenario for you? And you never know what's going to happen. But generally, just like athletics, just like running, just like lifting weights, if you visualize yourself doing something, when you actually go to do it, you'll do better at it. If you visualize yourself winning a shooting competition or, burning down a stage, you're probably going to do much better than if you visualize yourself sucking at it. So do that with everything. Do that with your carry stuff too. What, in your day-to-day, in your environment, what is the best thing for you, do you think? Is the most dangerous thing for you going to a 7-Eleven to get gas on your way home from work at 10 o'clock at night? What would serve you best in that scenario? Again, don't let what somebody else thinks is best dictate what you think is best. They may be a very good trainer. They may be a very good instructor. I'm saying this even that applies to me telling you stuff. What I say may or may not apply to you. I don't know you. Unless you're one of the few patrons that support, I may not know a lot about you. What in your life is the most likely? What in your life is going to serve you best? Some really good instructor may be crazy for appendix carry. Appendix carry may not work for you. It doesn't work for me, really. Because of my body shape, I'm, very hourglass shaped. It would look like I have a giant tumor there. I generally carry strong side hip carrier somewhere or generally in that area. Or just behind the hip because it blends in. Like I said, I have an hourglass figure, so my shirt just hangs down. I can carry a pretty big gun back there and nobody sees it. It's hard for me to carry even a small gun appendix. Yeah, that's just an example. There's nothing wrong with appendix carry if it works for you. That's just an example. But what works for you? And adapt your carry. Don't think that because, so-and-so Navy SEAL operator loves the Glock 19 with a TLR2 light on it and a Trigicon sight on the top, that's what you have to run, because that may not be what's best for you. Maybe you live, in coastal Oregon where it rains constantly, and if you've ever tried to look through a red dot that had rain on the lens, you'll know why I'm making that comparison. Maybe that's not what's best for you. And nobody knows what the future holds. Nobody knows the day or the hour. Jesus says that, and I believe Jesus. I don't know what the future holds. I don't know what tomorrow holds. But you can try and war game scenarios or common likely scenarios for you in your area. And be realistic with yourself. If you have teenage kids and you often go to do kids still go to malls? I don't even know. But let's say you have teenage kids and you often go to malls to drop them off or pick them up. Active shooters in a mall are a real thing. What would you want in that scenario? How do you normally dress? There is a time and a place to dress around your gun, but be realistic. If there's a certain way that you have to dress for work or whatever, just like me, I work out, hopefully by God's grace, twice a day except for Sabbath. And if I'm working out in silkies and a tank top, I'm probably not concealed carry in my full-size 1911. So think of solutions for you. Don't think that because it's recommended by somebody, even if that somebody is great, they probably realize what's best for them, not what's best for you. So adapt your carry. One example, like I said, urban versus rural. If you are in an urban environment, and you're going to that mall, an active shooter might be a thing, you might opt for the gun with bigger capacity. And that scenario, a Glock 19 that you shoot well may be a better choice for you. If you're going hiking on a trail, if you're more likely to encounter a bear or a mountain lion than a thug, then perhaps the .357 Magnum revolver is a better choice for you. If you live in a state that's permissive of open carry, my boss, the owner of the company that I work for, he told me that he routinely goes into the bank with his big, full-size open carry gun. Nobody bats an eye. That's just the culture in the place that we live in, and I really like that. I don't do that because I think concealed carry is better from a tactics standpoint. I think it's better that they don't know that I have a gun or what gun that I have, rather than openly displaying it most of the time. There's a time for open carry. Obviously, that's part of my job. When I was commander for tactical team, I did that. When I'm at work now, I do that because that's part of my job. But if I'm, concealed carrying or out and about as a, let's just say, a regular civilian, I think concealed carry is better. So what can you conceivably conceal carry comfortably? Urban versus rural versus for knives. One of the knives I carried for a long time, I don't anymore. But for a long time, my go-to EDC knife was a Gerber 06 Auto. Not like the cheap Gerbers at Walmart, but the really nice. Gerber makes some really nice high-end knives. S30V, military issue, automatic opening knives. And the Gerber 06 Auto. And just a clear illustration of this, in urban environments, I really like the Tonto blade. I've done a little bit of knife fighting. I've done a little bit of hand-to-hand combat and ground fighting. Didn't mention in my bio. Not really relevant to gunfighter life normally. But for that kind of work, and for urban environments like punching through, auto metal, Tonto blades are freaking awesome. They're not so awesome for EDC in a rural environment. They make that blade in a Tonto and in a sweatback, and I had both, and I would switch back and forth because you could skin an animal with a Tonto, but if I'm going out hunting, I don't want a Tonto blade. It's not best all around. It's a niche thing. It's good for an urban environment. It would not be my go-to. I would not carry a Tonto in a rural environment where I was going to go hunting and harvest food and things like that. That sweat blade has been a mainstay for survivalists, for homesteaders, for preppers, for bushcrafting, for a long time for a lot of reasons. It's better for that than a Tonto is. Not that you couldn't use a Tonto, or not that I wouldn't take a Tonto over nothing in a situation where I needed a knife, but it's just an example of urban versus rural carry and how you might adapt that. Another thing is when I was a professional hunter and guide, I've hunted beasts all over the country when I was a professional, and I often found myself needing a multi-tool for that job, and that was part of my EDC. I would grab a multi-tool. I don't generally day-to-day have a full-size multi-tool anymore. I have a little tiny one, a little Leatherman Micra that I use. It comes in handy for my work as managing a firearms and training company. People have stuck cases. People need help sighting something in. That little Leatherman Micra comes in handy, but it's very, very tiny. It's very, very light. That's just an example of adapting to your day-to-day, everyday environment and what's most common for me. Can I use my go-to EDC knife to pry out a stuck case from an AR? Yeah, I can, but I really don't want to. Carrying that little Leatherman Micro, if it's going to save my EDC knife and keep it sharp, that's really a better way to go. You'll know if you listen for a while, one of my go-to EDC recommendations for anybody getting into EDC, for getting into carrying a knife, and I think pretty much all men should, especially gunfighters, is a Buck 110 Slim. Buck 110 Slim is a great EDC. It's affordable, they make it, and even your basic model, it has good steel, it's very sharp, it's a great knife. But, if you're going out hiking, bushcrafting, I'll go out and harvest agave or harvest stuff to eat, then I want a little bit larger fixed blade. It's better for that. It's just another example. Another example just for me, like I said, I often go out hiking in the wilderness. I live in a pretty rural wilderness environment and surrounded by, a 1.8 million acre national forest, which is freaking awesome. I love that. It's great. There are bears and mountain lions and things like that here. An example for me is I often carry an STI 2011, which is a 1911 double stack and 9mm. And, I switched to 9mm from 45 a long time ago, back when everybody thought 40 was the hot thing. And if you carried a 9, you were stupid. No, everybody who was a law enforcement officer or anything carried a 40. And I was a law enforcement officer then, and I switched to 9. I think for humans, for that kind of environment, a 9mm has pretty clearly demonstrated that it's the best round. But I often carry a 45, especially when I'm out hiking. Why would I do that? Because I think that I'm very good and well versed with the 1911. It shoots naturally for me. I do a lot of practicing, the vast majority of my practicing with a 1911 platform. And if I'm going to encounter a bear, the 220 grain plus P hard cast high antimony bullets have a proven track record. They do pretty well on that. And they'd also be fine in a defensive encounter because people do get jumped and stuff like that, even in national parks. So I'll often carry that gun. That's just an example of adapting to the environment. Maybe you're a Glock person. Maybe you, most of the time, carry a Glock. Like I said, a Glock 19 is probably the most common. Perhaps you want to go out hiking somewhere, or somewhere where you might have a longer range engagement in a wide open area. Maybe you're going to switch to 357 SIG for that. Glock still makes Glocks in 357 SIG. I forget the models. Glock 33 comes to mind. That might be wrong. But the Glocks in 357 SIG, you could switch, and most of your training and everything is going to transfer over. That's just an example of adapting your carry to your environment. When I was the commander of a tactical team in that large metropolitan area, I had two different, I guess you would call them EDC rifles that I carried all the time in a pack on my back or in a vehicle that I was in. And those were kind of night and day different. I had, one of my go-tos was a pistol AR with a pistol brace. It's not really a pistol, but for the ATS reasons, you have to do it that way to consider it a pistol. One of them was that. It was very light, very handy, 5 pounds and something. And my other one was a SCAR 17. Light and handy compared to a lot of other 308 battle rifles. But the SCAR Heavy is still a big rifle. It's still a big, heavy rifle. But I would take that in certain situations, where vehicle rammings were the primary threat, where stopping and going through barriers was the primary thing. I would take that SCAR 17, that 308. If I was going to be in tight, close, environment of very small rooms like a convention with very thin walls and a lot of little small contained areas like a giant convention, then, the AR pistol was a better choice. It was better for that environment. As a gunfighter, I think your primary focus should be on being a great shooter, a great rifle shooter, a great handgun shooter, a great shotgun shooter, being a master of the craft. And the tools are just a tool. Like I said, there's no one gun that's best for everything. If there was a best rifle that was best for everything, everybody would just use that one rifle. If there was one best handgun, then you wouldn't be all this debate. Everybody would just have that one handgun, but they don't. So what's most likely best for you in your environment? With that, guys, I'll say thanks for listening. Give some thought to what you do live life with a purpose. Jesus says, let he who has no sword sell his cloak and buy one. What sword's best for you? You're called to watch and be ready. I don't know that every man is called to have a sword, but I know that some are, and I believe that I am. And if you're listening to this, likely you are. But what's best for you? Be prepared. You've been given a gift. You are made in the image of God. And one of those things is thinking ahead of time. I love my dog, my Rhodesian Ridgeback puppy, but he doesn't think about what might happen tomorrow. He lives in the now, but you can not worry about, but think about threats and do analysis and things like that. So I encourage you to do that as a gunfighter, as an alpha male. So give it some thought. Give it some more thought than XYZ person carries a Glock 19, so that's what I'm going to carry. It's okay if you're starting out and you don't really know anything and you want to start out there, that's fine. But realize and try other things and think about what may or may not work better for you. You may find out that is the gun for you. You may find out that it's not. With that, guys, thanks for listening. Don't forget to like, subscribe, comment, leave a review of the podcast. If you want to support financially, because these are free to listen to for you, but they're not free to put out. And it's a blessing to have people that support. And if you want to be part of the tribe, if you think this was worth the fraction of the cost of a box of ammo, as little as $1, you can go to Patreon and support. Just go to goodshepherdtraining.com, goodshepherdtraining.com if you want to see some cool pictures, if you want to get a hold of me, ask me a question, or like I said, if you want to support, go to goodshepherdtraining.com. Consider supporting. If you like this podcast, you may like the Alpha Male podcast and Simple Man Sermons, if you care about the important stuff, the preachings of a simple man called by God to share the good news of Jesus Christ. As a thanks for listening, staying tuned to the end, I usually throw in a tactical tip. Here's a tactical tip if you decide to carry a polymer striker fire handgun, which is by far the vast majority of people carrying handguns nowadays. I'm sure you all know the loading, unloading procedure for your handgun. At the end of that procedure, after you've put the magazine in, let the slide go forward, however you decide to do that, grab the back of the slide and send it forward. Once it goes forward, give it a little bump, like holding it with your dominant hand, and literally punch the back of the slide like a hammer fist, if you know what a hammer fist is for fighting. The back of the slide, not crazy hard, but hit it hard and make sure that it's locked in battery. That is a common malfunction for striker-fired handguns, is that slide is not all the way forward in battery. So if you're going to carry it and trust your life to it, before you put it in the holster, hit the back of that slide and make sure that it's all the way in battery. You also may, if you have it in your holster and you've bumped it or knocked it or something like that, just give it that bump to make sure that it's in battery. Because if it's not, the gun won't fire. So that's just a little tip to add to your EDC, I guess you would call it ritual. Load your handgun up, throw one in the chamber, and then smack the back of that slide or punch the back of that slide with a hammer fist and make sure it's seated tightly. You can also just reach up with your thumb and shove it real hard to make sure that it's there. And on that note, if you're into CQB, close quarters battle, there is a technique. That if you push your semi-automatic handgun into something and pull the trigger, if the slide gets pushed back, it will not fire. So you cannot do a hard contact shot. If you push into something and pull the trigger, the gun will be out of battery and it won't fire. You can reach your thumb up there and shove it harder and push it back into battery, and that will give you one shot if you find yourself in that scenario, on the ground, somebody on top of you, whatever, and that gun is out of battery. You can reach up with your thumb or thumbs and shove that slide into battery, and you will get one shot. The gun won't fire after that, but that one shot may be the one that you need, and it's better than no shot. So that's another tactical tip. With that, guys, thanks for listening, and have a blessed day.